I'm really excited about inFamous because as a player, I am one of those people who wants to be able to just go everywhere.
And when we say that it's an open world game, we mean that in 3 dimensions.
We have this ability to climb over everything. It's kind of infectious.
PS3 is really the only place we could have made this.
PlayStation 3 is kind of like a very deep well, and I have never seen the bottom of it yet, performance-wise. So it's a pleasure to have that freedom, to create a game where you're really limited by your imagination and the hardware is not this roadblock that it used to be.
It's a large interactive streaming world with tons of characters, tons of content, and we certainly take good advantage of the hard disk that's there to be shuttling all this information in. But perhaps the most important aspect of it for us is the cell processor. It's this mind-boggling number of calculations that are going into how to get everybody's feet and body lean in the correct place. And on top of that, it's doing visibility, it's doing a whole bunch of our skinning and animation code, it's doing particle systems. And all of this stuff has been crafted and created to run specifically on the cell processors.
There are layers and layers of animations. It's something that the PlayStation 3 and our engine actually allows us to really take advantage of. It's just layering those and not having to worry about the overhead associated with that. Allows us to do some very creative things and some very expressive things.
We really needed to have the power of the PS3 there. All the bandwidth we get out of the RSX graphics chip, the capacity of the Blu-ray.
When we're making this game for the PS3, we're constantly amazed by how much the technology allows us to add a lot more. It's cool.
From the very beginning of the game, we knew we wanted a system that allowed Cole to just kind of master the city, to climb all over it. It's a jungle gym for Cole.
If it looks like you should be able to get there, you can get there. And we really made it so that you have this feeling of playing a very live, kind of agile, panther-like character who really just is capable of going everywhere.
Our goal was to let you grab and climb on anything you saw, but in a real city, there are lots of things you can grab. We have a debug mode in the game where you can turn on little displays to show you everything that Cole might grab, and it's amazing.
As he moves along the rooftops, there's a sort of rhythm to his actions, and as a player, you feel it. You zip along, you jump, you repulse gravity a little bit, you grab onto a bit of a building, climb up, see an enemy, blast them off the rooftop, and keep going. And it's really addictive.
Cole was an urban explorer before the blast, so he already had some physical abilities to climb, and he was obviously brave enough to do it. But now that he's electrically powered, he's even more able to take advantage of that. It kind of amps him up even more.
We had to work really, really hard on figuring out what the player really intended when they're jumping through the air. Are they actually trying to grab that ledge, or are they trying to grab the ledge next to that? We call it reading the player's mind through his thumbs. We've been pretty successful with it, and it makes the game really fun to play because it doesn't feel like you're using the controller. If we do our job right, then the controller disappears. You don't think about it at all. You just do what you want to do, and it happens.
If you had control of electricity, what would you do?
One of the reasons we decided to make Cole an electrically based superhero is that electricity is all around you when you're in the city. You see power lines everywhere. You see light poles. You see, junction boxes on the wall. So wherever Cole goes, he's kind of really in his milieu.
And our character draws electricity out of the power grid, and it fuels his powers. And of course, because we chose electricity, we could go really deep on that one subject. We've modeled all the metal in the world to conduct electricity, to jump between objects and zap people, zap enemies.
We knew we really wanted him to be able to do these when hanging off the side of a pole, when standing on a bar, balancing on a bar, even when hanging from the edge of a ledge. And so we really put a premium on making sure that he could do all those things and he could fluidly move from jumping and landing to immediately shooting.
What we chose to do was pick the power for the hero around what would be really fun in a video game context, and then build the world and the guy's personality and everything around that one choice. Because we're making a superhero game, or a guy with superpowers, it really seemed like we need to give you this opportunity to be heroic, to make choices that were sort of for the greater good, at the expense of maybe something you might want. And for you to make a choice that feels heroic, you need to be given the option to be a total jerk, to be selfish. Otherwise, there is no choice.
The more you use your powers for good things, you'll find that your powers start offering you opportunities to maybe be more precise with your attacks. On the flip side, the more evil you are, the more grand and destructive your powers will become kind of on a course way. And that's kind of our desire to really give the player this experience of, hey, it's the path I'm choosing that matters.
The people in Empire City, the people that you're helping, they'll remember if you're a jerk. They'll remember if you're a nice person. And that'll affect how you get to play the game in the future.
If they like you, they actually might lend a hand with some of the things you need to do. If they don't like you, well, you'll find some spontaneous mobs forming and attacking you with rocks. And the best part is that you can just shoot them with your electrical superpower and they go flying across the world.
It's a believable character in believable human situations, except for that you've got this kick-ass supernatural power, and you get to choose how to use it. Empire City certainly has a lot of character.
The DNA of superheroes takes place in major metropolitan cities, and so we knew all along we were going to do our version of Gotham, Empire City.
And real cities are dirty, they're grimy, they've got clutter, they've got garbage in every corner.
We started talking about the city breathing, the city groaning, the buildings crumbling off in the distance as music. Like, what would that sound like?
Since the blast, the place has become this sort of wonderland of destruction where a lot of masonry got thrown, higgly-piggly in the blast. Cars and buses smashed into the sides of buildings. It feels like this hurricane is torn through. It's bleeding. The city itself is broken.
It's foul. We wanted the city to feel like there was despair around. So if you see people walking down the street, they don't look very happy because they aren't. And it really gives the city a feeling of life.
The city's actually reactive to who you are in the world. If you choose to be a nice guy and win the love of the people,
I know you can heal him.
you'll actually see the city get cleaner and kind of repair itself a little bit. And that's pretty crazy. We wanted to make the thing have a character and sort of look back at you for what you did, to respond, and not just be this inert mass.
The architecture is clearly influenced by two big things. The first was a desire to have it feel like a grounded, largely Western city. That's where superhero stories exist. At the same time, we looked at cities, international cities that had really great opportunities for climbing and jungle gymming across. It's kind of a mishmash, very intentionally, of things to try and show age of a city and like it's been lived in.
Not only are they controlling the character, but they're controlling a character in a world where they can do anything they want to. They can literally wander the city aimlessly for hours if they choose, and the music needs to account for all of that.
It's been really important for us to approach the music like sound design, to really capture the spirit, the voice of Empire City. Even though we're in a big urban environment, we want the percussion and the instrumentation to be very tribal, very savage.
One of the first things in this game that I was also approached about, which I've never seen in any other game and I've never had to do either, was to score things in two different ways depending on where you are in the game or how you're doing. You can choose to be a hero or an anti-hero, and the music needs to echo that.
That was fantastic.
There's an edgy, punchy, kind of dark and very thoughtful component to the music. The ambient music is meant to be bleeding out of this broken city, this city that's sort of been bombed out and is hurting. And so much of the music is really meant to meld with the sound design and almost become indistinguishable from it.
Initially, when we were hearing that the city was kind of alive, and how we would do that musically and sound design to blend those two worlds, I had two ideas in mind. The first one was to go out and do some street recording. The second part was to do a custom sampling session.
You want it to be orchestral, but you don't want it to be John Williams. You want it to have, a little bit more of an urban quality to it. We were sort of driven by kind of an industrial feel, a lot of percussion.
The way that we address that is by using a lot of instruments that are very rustic and urban, like trash cans and metal pipes and cardboard boxes, and just beating on all kinds of different things in different ways.
And then at the same time, we've taken a lot of really conventional instruments and tried to play them and use them and frankly abuse them in really unconventional ways.
Not to mention that our artist Amon Tobin manipulates sounds and carries them into a completely different space, so that even the combat music has this effect of sounding like the city is kind of throwing its head back and roaring.
The thing that's really different about inFamous is the level of density we have in the city. It makes it a much more enjoyable environment to play in.
We want the whole thing to be an immersive experience.
You experience the city more than just hear it or feel it or play it. It's the combined efforts that really make inFamous something special in terms of the whole package.
The game opens with this really awful, devastating explosion. It knocks down 6 square blocks of Empire City.
Hurts and kills, thousands of people.
But somehow you survive. You have these crazy electrical powers. So one of the things that we really find fun about superhero stories is the process of understanding where these powers came from and why they're there. In inFamous, this isn't a question that gets answered all for you at the beginning of the game.
The phrase that we always talked about was 0 to hero. You want to be this guy who's incredibly low status at the beginning of the game, and you want to be either famous or infamous at the end. You become this superhuman person. Do you use that for good or for evil?
The sorts of decisions you make like that, minute to minute, affect how the whole city reacts to you.
There's a lot of depth in the behaviors of both the enemies and also the non-player characters, just the citizens.
I've been robbed!
The sort of systemic complexity of the game is something that allows the player to have unexpected, exciting things happen.
Feds dropped some more medical supplies, but they landed on that roof. Could you knock them down?
There's this enormous world of side missions and quests that you can do in inFamous, which is on the order of 3 times as many things as the primary path has.
You're not in just one big long tunnel going from the beginning of the mission to the end of the mission every time. You're in a city and you can go wherever you want, whenever you want.
The cutscenes really were an attempt to tell stories that feel genuine in a graphic novel sense. They don't feel like we're exploiting the genre. They feel more like we're part of that genre. Really beautiful, detailed graphic art, but all kind of taken into a dimension where it can be animated and rendered and using effects to kind of tell our stories, at the same time really having it feel fresh and something people hadn't seen a lot of.
At first, it's just the standard disaster film where you happen to have superpowers. And as you get more into it, you understand that everything is not as it seems, and that the people you know aren't necessarily who you think they are.
It's like peeling an onion. You figure out one thing, you think you understand it, and then you find out that, well, you kind of understood it, but there's something deeper going on.
We've hidden all kinds of little narrative hiccups, which I'm sure people are never going to see. The casual player is never going to understand the depth of everything going on in Empire City. However, if you're a really dedicated player, if you're somebody that really wants to know every last bit of what's happening, it's there for you. You just have to decide that you want to explore this huge 3-dimensional sculpture that is Empire City. And you can just go right down the rabbit hole.
We are asking a critical thing of our players and our viewers, which is to believe that someone could get electrically superpowered. And that's kind of the gateway to the whole game.
Electricity is great because it's kind of malleable in what you can do with it. I mean, you can do the obvious, which is shoot somebody in the face with a lightning bolt, which is, I know, for me, kind of a core fantasy.
He starts out with 2 or 3 superpowers he can do, and throughout the game we unlock more and more of them.
He starts off with the ability to throw electricity from his hands, and he has the ability to throw out electromagnetic pulse waves.
it's an electric wave that's traveling out in front of him. Everything from that to the really crazy stuff you might expect with lightning, which is calling down a massive thunderstrike. They're more conventional things like grenades and rockets, but we've framed them in a way that it is Cole using and extending his powers.
Over the course of the game, you end up getting another 15 or 16 powers. And those powers, in addition to the ones you start off with, are all upgradable, at least 3 ways, and most of them actually end up having good and bad upgrades you can do depending on how you're playing the game. If you multiply it all out, I think you got over 80 powers that you end up with.
Cole is very dependent on electricity, and while it's the source of his strength, there are also a lot of weaknesses associated with that.
I'm so totally grateful. You're a lifesaver.
One of his powers is that he can kind of resuscitate people who are injured, or on the other hand, he can drain the electricity from people in the game and use that to fuel his own superpowers. Anytime that there's an interesting resource that the character wants that inherently hurts someone else, you're faced with this choice of, I want this thing, am I willing to hurt this person to get it?
So in a lot of ways, he's kind of challenged by this gift. This is the game that delivers on something I've thought about all the time, which is, if I had superpowers, what would I do with them? You know, if I could turn invisible, would I go on a stealth mission for the FBI, or would I sneak into the girls' locker room? You know, these are the kind of challenges that would be presented to you as a real life person when given superpowers.
We really wanted to kind of take you through that journey that you read about in graphic novels and you see on superhero movies. We wanted you to play that. It's remarkable. These guys have created between 20 and 30 minutes of animated movies in a remarkably short period of time. Clearly there's voiceover talent that's contributing to this, and there's music and scoring that's going to happen after it. But the principal production of that at Sucker Punch has been 4 guys really almost by themselves for, you know, a little over a year, and it's been a remarkable achievement for those guys.
I say bring it.
How many takes is this going to take?
You know, it's okay. We can have them kind of
Splice them?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, you want some hemming and hawing to use as B-roll?
That's all good. Yes. How did the concept for inFamous get started? How did you guys even start on this path?
Well, we were rolling off Sly 3 in 2006, and we knew we wanted to work again with Sony. We love working with Sony, so we basically split into small groups, and we each came up with a little pitch document. Here's a game we could build next, and this is the one that ended up turning into inFamous. We originally called it True Hero. Things changed a lot, over the course of inFamous development, but a lot of the stuff that we wanted to do at the beginning, we ended up keeping, that you're a hero, that you're protecting a city, your powers develop over the course of the game. All that was there in the beginning. You just kind of have to know how to look for it.
I got a regular slate. Ready? No.
Yeah. The inFamous series really is the story of Cole McGrath, and in inFamous 1, he sort of begins this adventure as a bike courier, kind of an invisible person in Empire City, and he delivers a package that changes his life. It's some kind of a bomb, it's not really clear what it is, creates a great explosion in the city, and kills a whole bunch of people. No!
In the middle of it all, he's left alive, but his body's been changed and he's been given these crazy electrical superpowers. So all throughout inFamous 1, he was trying to understand
why he'd been selected for this, what's happening to his body and the city around him. And he learns at the end of it that it was all to prepare him for this coming monster, this horrible, horrible beast that is capable of destroying civilizations. And he was told that he's the only one who can defeat it. So we start Infamous 2 with that beast arriving and him trying to fight it and failing. And then the game is all about gearing up for round 2.
This story finds us moving from Empire City down into the southeast of the United States in a fictional city called New Marais. There he's going to try and locate the source of the technology that built the device that exploded in Empire City in the first game, and see if that can be used in some way to help enhance the abilities he has.
Cole, as he goes through New Marais, is finding these things called blast cores. As he uses those, he gains more powers on his own.
Pulse a current through it, and its energy will release into the nearest conduit.
Whoa, so this is gonna make me stronger.
The militia are called the protectors of New Marais, but really they're kind of their own thing. Bertrand is the leader of the militia, and he wants everyone to think he's on their side, that he's helping them, but it's not clear if the solution is better than the problem in this case.
Up there, freaks!
In the first game, we wanted to give you that sense of personally going through an origin story. And in this game, we're kind of having you go through the experience of owning the mantle of being a superhero, choosing it versus having to be thrust upon you. I think all of us at Sucker Punch are gamers, and we want to make a really cool game because we love gaming, and nobody here is gonna not play the game. It's a product of a lot of people's hard work and creativity, and they're using their creativity to make things that they like and care about. I am super duper excited that we're at Comic-Con because to me it's just like popular culture. That is it, man. The fact that we're invited to participate is a big deal because it means we're part of popular culture, and if we have made the grade to be a part of it, then that's awesome. That means that we're succeeding at making people happy with the game, and that's totally our goal.
It's huge. Going to panels and listening to people talk and stuff like that, it's going to be really cool to be like on the other side and finding out that there's enough people out there that really see Infamous as like this comic book come to life.
I think when we were doing the original Infamous, we knew we were doing superhero, but I don't think we wanted to do it in kind of super traditional superhero way. Like, the first thing we'd have to tell people is, no, he doesn't wear tights or anything like that. It's like, what if it's a regular person who would get superpowers? It fit more into some of the kind of postmodern stuff, the feel of a modern city in crisis, kind of the dystopian books that had been out in the last 10 years, some really, really great stuff.
The most direct influences on Infamous don't come from the comics I read growing up. It's from all the media that was influenced by those comics. So it's kind of second generation stuff. So Batman movies, especially the recent Batman movies, have been a big influence for us because they have that sort of spirit of comics in them, but it's filtered through a modern, up-to-date gestalt. The city feels realistic. The characters are flawed.
I don't think we wanted to just say, well, here's this comic, let's just go make it, and just change the character. I don't think that would have been a huge failure for us. So this is an honorable treatment of a comic hero.
But with a hero that was really designed to make sense and be really fun in the context of a game where you did have choices, important choices, which we always felt were part of becoming a superhero. Infamous was the first game we'd really made where we were making a game for ourselves in some sense. We have so many comic fans here. It was fun to make a game where you were really trying to do a game that people like you would enjoy.
For me, it was escapism. I grew up in real small town. It's really tough to get this sense of bigness. Before I got into comics, I was into, Bionic Man and Evel Knievel. There's something out there that you could turn it on and you kind of like have that level of escape. And like with comic books, it was definitely that.
All the artists from the studio, we actually make a comic called Atomic Lead. Kind of quick comic for a while, but then kind of got the itch and I kind of start doing my own comic again and print up stuff and Xerox, fold it in half, staple it myself, take it to local comic convention. I think it definitely helps to have that love for that medium, and then you can kind of take that and apply what works and kind of discard the stuff that doesn't work.
If you go back to the 1950s Spider-Man when he first started, the stuff is so ridiculous. He's having conversations with his enemies as he's fighting them, like between punches. Now, what I'm about to do to you is, and he's wearing underwear, like this crazy. The powers are kind of the element that's still similar to comic books, but then we're trying to marry that with a realistic environment and an art style that makes it more believable to people who aren't necessarily huge comic book fans.
But if you go too real, then some of the stuff that we're trying to do, a guy having electricity powers and crazy supervillains, then that doesn't work anymore. So you want to be in that space where that's believable.
Real characters that have real problems. Peter Parker has to make rent. Bruce Banner has to actually deal with being a fugitive. And Tony Stark, he's an alcoholic, and that's the type of character that, Cole is. We feel that people just related to him on a level that even we didn't expect.
I think that the kind of the history of video games made out of existing heroes was one of the reasons we decided to go with an original IP. They've had a mixed bag. It has a whole bunch of expectations and limitations that have been built into its universe. You take Superman as an example. The guy has unlimited power. If you're going to build it out of that character, it's like, well, kryptonite harms him, but otherwise, what is he not going to do,
It's very difficult to make a video game where that's really fun. Video games suck at that. They only succeed if they bind you into space, play space.
In inFamous 2, you just basically have the expectations of staying true to the characters that, you originally created. So you get to capture a lot of that rawness that you don't get when you're trying to stay true to an existing established character, But here we get to just, create what we want, which is awesome.
But to really improve and get to the next level, be willing to throw away your old stuff and start over.
There was a lot of splatter work done in the first one. I mean, literally every page was just a big wet splatter everywhere, and I felt that worked really well in an urban city. In New Mirai, it just didn't seem like it would make as much sense, I kind of wanted to capture a little bit more of what this New Orleans-ish kind of city would look like, so just kind of removing a lot of the wet splatters and going more for a watercolor look as opposed to more traditional comic book coloring.
I've seen some graphic, cut scenes where, somebody hit them and it's like kapow, and you see the word kapow. The direct reference with the border or the panels and the word balloons and stuff. It's really an element of the printed medium. Some of those things doesn't really apply. This is an evolution of, taking something that printed and now seeing it, in motion and with sound. Like all art form, is always evolving, which is really exciting. Super, super exciting to be, at that edge. And what we're doing is not a comic book, nor is it a straight, full-on, animated piece. It's actually somewhere in between, and we're trying to carve that little niche.
There's an experience that everybody wants to have, which is to be a superhero. If we can make a game that lets you be that superhero and own that experience, that's really my objective.
And I think we are probably still the underdog, of the whole thing. Marvel and DC and Batman, Spider-Man, all those guys have years and years of history of kind of ingrained into the modern culture. So we're just trying to, put our notch on it.
Out of the swamp, and there she was, New Mirai. Came here 4 years ago while learning how to climb. These monsters are gonna get in my way. say bring it.
What do you get when you put together a renowned rock drummer, classical musicians, a southern funk band, an award-winning composer, and Sony Computer Entertainment? An unprecedented musical collaboration for the soundtrack to Infamous 2. The sequel to 2009's Infamous has main man Cole wielding brand new powers in a new city, New Marais. To amp up the ambience, the entire production crew trekked from the Bay Area down to New Orleans and back again to score Cole's moody new playground. This is New Marais, a swampy, devastated city overrun by mutants. If it looks familiar, that's because it's based on New Orleans, a city with a history of music and destruction. For SCEA music manager Jonathan Mayer, the backdrop was pure inspiration.
You worked on the first Infamous game, so what are you doing different with this one?
In Infamous 1, so much of the score was trying to express the personality of this amazing city that Sucker Punch had built for the game. As soon as we started discussing the new city with them, and of course the concept that it was based on New Orleans said so much to us musically right away, that we knew we had an immediate sort of like game changer.
And a move away from Empire City's electronic-based rhythms. To nail a percussion-heavy backbone with a funky southern twist, Jonathan recruited rock drummer Brain Mantilla, who's played with everyone from Tom Waits to Guns N' Roses. New Orleans funk band Galactic were added to the mix for some vocal flavor.
Bringing in the guys from Galactic and Brain was all actually pretty easy because they're all collaborative artists by nature.
I listened to the old soundtrack, and they said they wanted to get away from the electronic side and make it more organic.
We've played a lot of video games over our lives, and knowing that the game is kind of based loosely in a fictitious New Orleans kind of environment, we kind of knew what they were looking for from us.
Bringing in the more classical elements are orchestrator Tim Davies and orchestral composer Jim Dooley. They both contributed to the first game's soundtrack. We caught up with them during a recording session at Skywalker Ranch.
Working on the second game presented its own new set of challenges aside from the first one. The first was we wanted to do better than we did the first time.
But translating Cole's heroic sacrifice better isn't exactly a stroll through the radioactive park. Under Jonathan's guidance, the musicians were forced to stretch their creative comfort zones.
We started thinking, well, let's take real musical instruments and stuff like that and just make them sound weird and twisted and dark.
Well, what we did with this is we worked with a small string group, and with 5 players and close miking, and getting sort of really having them involved in the process, we were able to get lots of unique sounds out of classical instruments. So it was just violin, viola, cello, and bass, but we kind of made them sound in a way like distorted guitars.
These cues that Jonathan would give us, which were just that, like cues, that didn't have to be exactly this length, and there was a certain amount of freedom built in there for us to just try and develop the sound that he was describing.
In a funny way, it was kind of pick a bunch of wrong notes and odd rhythms.
It was heroic, but it was very distressed, so that's why when I was making the percussion sounds, I was really trying to, I detuned a lot of them. I never tuned up when I had somebody play a bass or anything, because that kind of dissonance is part of the game.
They were just forced to sort of do things kind of wrong.
We could build to that. That was hip.
What's the rhythm of the game?
The people in charge are digging the really brutal, and they kept using the word brutal. It was like brutal, like more brutal, big drum stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that.
Like in Cole's first adventure, unconventional sounds required some unconventional techniques and instruments.
Stuff like frying pans and just, mixing bowls, those kinds of things sprinkled around this 9-bingy bass drum and different calfskin-headed drums that I've been collecting.
And then we would start, be hitting the strings with pencils.
Tim started getting really creative with the kinds of direction he would put on the charts for these guys to play.
Here we go.
He came up with a direction that would be over, certain parts that the guys were supposed to play would say FWI on the score over them. Nobody wanted to be the guy that was like, what does this mean? And then finally someone did, and Tim sort of looked at them like, you should know this, and went, it means f with it.
Pulling off a soundtrack with so many different musicians required some killer collaboration. The team would exchange bits and pieces of original music, building upon each other's work.
For all the history of great tunes and orchestrations, like how do we do this in a new way? You need a good team to trust so that you can fail and move on with great success.
The Sony guys would come down with string quartets that they had written or little pieces and say, okay, here's this. How about you do like a real brutal big drum thing to it? Okay, I'll do that. Okay, now how about you go and do like more of an ambient thing on the Jungle Bizarro kit.
Like all of a sudden I'd hear something Galactic did or Jim do, and I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of already did something like that. That's cool. We're all it just all kind of fit.
All of the elements that they brought to the table worked really well together and somehow complemented each other.
There was a lot of interplay, a lot of ideas being thrown around. And it was great that we had the time to experiment with that.
Good. Wow. Great.
It's like a game of telephone almost.
Telephone's a great analogy because the way that things get sort of twisted and manipulated in a game of telephone, we wanted that to happen. Take the thing that this guy did and do your thing with it.
How is songwriting for a video game different from just regular songwriting?
It's very different, actually, to write for the game than it is to write for your own project. And it's very liberating in a way that we came up with stuff that, just by experimenting, we came up with stuff that we may never have thought of, just because we had complete freedom.
It was very different than recording for the band.
That was cool. For me, it was awesome because I got to experiment with, so many different rhythms, like some on time ones.
With Sony, it's great. We get away with experimenting a lot, and they want that. And sometimes you miss, but you're not going to get in trouble for trying here, which is great.
As it went, because I was like, they were digging it, saying, hey, keep going, keep experimenting. They were like, no one says that these days, That's why it was so fun to do this.
Some games use techniques that make their soundtracks and music more seamless. They'll do it all in one key, all in one time signature.
Right.
You guys did not do that.
No. I actually cringe when I hear stories like that. How to make that work in the context of the game and how to get from the piece of music that plays before that to the piece of music that plays after that and all those things. That's just more work for us to do, but it's work we relish and work we enjoy, and it's work that needs to happen to really nail it.
And from the sounds of it, they did. Since these super musicians scored Cole's journey, we had to ask, what superpower would they want?
Flying.
It would have to be some sort of super sax playing ability.
Wow.
I would like to be able to read people's minds.
I'd like to have gills, like Waterworld.
I would like to be able to drink, as much beer as I could possibly humanly consume without being drunk.
I think probably like the cool geek answer for me would be telekinesis. I've always wanted to be telekinetic. Like I'll, spend a few minutes every day at my desk just trying to move things with my mind.
Well, their telekinesis powers might need some work, but at least this set of talented musicians have one super skill down pat, creating a killer soundtrack for Cole's continuing saga.
Hey, it's Nate Fox here at Sucker Punch Productions. Want to talk to you today about inFamous Festival of Blood and the all-new move support for Festival of Blood and inFamous 2. So Festival of Blood is actually a story that's being made up by Zeke. He's making up this tall tale to impress a girl at a bar. But the story he tells is of Cole McGrath getting bitten by this vampire, Bloody Mary.
The more she drank, the prettier she got.
So of course Cole's gonna fight a huge assortment of enemies. My favorite are the Fiends, these quick vampires that are all over the city, and can move in the blink of an eye. Even more dangerous than the fiends are the harpies, female vampires that can attack Cole from any angle. And the most menacing of all are the firstborn. Any pedestrian on the street can transform into a giant bat. And Cole, he has a hard time fighting these guys. So when fighting vampires, you really need to be equipped. And that's why Cole carries around a big wooden stake. Now, Cole's a vampire in this story, and that means he gets all new powers. The best is Shadow Swarm, which means Cole can fly. Nowhere in the city is off limits now. inFamous 2 had a really cool feature called UGC, User-Generated Content, where anyone can make their own stories in the inFamous universe and then share them online with other people. In Festival of Blood, we take it one step further, giving players the ability to create comic book style cutscenes that allow them to tell their stories in a rich way right alongside the dynamic action they've already got in their missions. And of course, these comic book style cutscenes will also be coming to inFamous 2 UGC as well. Something new to both inFamous 2 and Festival of Blood is move support. Now we're giving gamers a more precise way to explore the open world environment of New Marais. The intuitive nature of the move controller makes things like sniping or even flying through the environment with Shadow Swarm second nature. The move controller allows players precision like they've never had before, complemented by the buttons that allow for that fast-paced action inFamous is known for. Festival of Blood has everything you're looking for. It's a standalone Cole McGrath story full of all the action and cool graphics you'd expect from an inFamous title. You can get it on PSN for $9.99.
Come on, let's go!
From all of us at Sucker Punch, I'd like to wish you a happy Halloween and good luck with those vampires.
PlayStation.
Oh, I want to give him a little more anger in his eyes. So I know I've got this image that has the rage in his forehead and eyes. I can just add a little bit of that shape from his eyes, you know, into the character.
It's like we can really say, okay, that's a really cool moment that we're going to push the camera in and we're going to get all that.
I mean, there are two fundamental changes for this game. The first is that it's on a new piece of hardware, and the second is that it's a new character. And those, I think, are the seed decisions that almost every other decision we made is based on those two decisions, and they were probably made 3 years ago.
With this jump in hardware, you really have you know, the expectations to see what is next gen. And I think a lot of that is not just better graphics, better lighting, smoother rendering, but the facial capture and the performances that are coming through, just this fuller cinematic experience.
You are not in control.
One of the things that's really exciting is actually capturing the facial animation from the actors and actually getting all those nuances and everything that they bring to their performance, and it just really helps set you in that world. We take scans of the actor going through a range of poses, and we just really want, what is that actor's physiology capable of?
We're using the moving points in space, but in a way that triggers the real nuances and micro movements of what happens with the skin on the face.
You can imagine if every one of these joints are doing that independently, you can have an infinite range of possibilities of what the face can do.
This is pretty freaking awesome.
And you can see right here where it says, okay, this is the area where there's tension, this is the area where a wrinkle is going to be coming through.
You know, they've got the muscle over bone and skin and fat and unique things about how their face moves, and when you get that full range of scans, it's cool to see them get triggered in by the motion just naturally.
We just see awesome performances on the mocap stage, and this time around, I feel like we're getting that. We're getting closer. Whenever somebody has like the small moment of thought, it really, really shows.
It's really exciting to be part of the first wave of this technology where we're grabbing the face and the body motion capture in the same sessions. We're getting results that are much smoother, and that's really, really cool to see.
You are not in control.
This is the super hard part, is making something that's so soft like smoke feel like it's got that impact. Our main character, Delson, has basically the coolest power. It's like going up to a genie and asking for more wishes.
What happens is when he's near other conduits, he picks up their ability.
The first power that he gets is the smoke power.
That means he can drain it, he can turn into it, and he can project it. When you think about where is smoke in a city, you think of maybe chimneys, fires.
You can get smoke from vehicles in this game, but you have to destroy them first.
And of course, those end up blowing up and blowing up other things around them. And all of those things now become smoke sources.
Every designer loves a burning car. I don't know why, but every effects artist has to do this at some point.
The PlayStation 4 is really allowing us to do some stuff that we couldn't before. And that meant writing new tools and new particle systems to accommodate that.
All of our particles are self-shadowing, taking environment light.
You can see that the particles are actually affected by the environment shadows as well.
It just makes everything feel more connected to the world. It brings it all together.
Honestly, for me, the effects are the coolest part of the game right now.
In a fluid fashion, you can combo up melee hits to dashes and moving away evasion stuff, to shooting, to dashing back in. You can dash through guys, grab them, flip them over.
Bam! Oh, that's beautiful. It inspires that visceral reaction in people when they see it.
So it tosses things in the air, and then they kind of like almost hover with some smoke around them, and then they blow up. Instead of just, it's actually windy gusts of. It's like, yeah. Whoa, I'm like, you know, whirlwind of smoke. Me too, and these bad guys, right? And then at the end, all this crap's in the air. Blah.
I'm gonna shoot this thing right in front of me. So in the middle of combat, there are bullets flying at you, grenades, whatever's coming at you. You can dodge left, dodge right, completely dematerialize, and then rematerialize somewhere else.
You can also dash into vents. So we made this effect where it sort of swirls in.
Yeah, so he's actually cranking up, and then he kind of does a corkscrew, he jumps.
It's one of those things that just gives you all this energy, and you can sort of jump into combat, jump into action, and you feel so powerful and quick, and you almost want to get surrounded. You're waiting for that moment to get surrounded so that you could just unleash this power that they didn't even know you had.
Delson is basically conjuring up a storm of smoke and ash.
I think that if you time it out, like, you can push all the ambience down, and it gets kind of quiet, almost like an inhale. Yeah, kind of has that.
We were really pushing it. Let's have Delson go as high as freaking possible.
Here he is, he's in the air, he kind of tucks in.
By the time it gets to, about here, he's pretty much reformed at that point, yeah.
And then he kind of dive bombs in. And at that point, he's kind of like dematerialized.
Anything breakable, it's going to destroy.
Yeah.
Any car, it's going to toss, tumble, throw.
Yeah.
Any person.
Yep. Maximum number of things flying around in the air.
We're trying to make you feel like you're this unstoppable force, and it takes wave after wave of enemy to give you a challenge. Your character is the weapon, and that's something that's really, really turned out to be a lot of fun.
I think we kind of were all excited about the idea of doing it here. It's our hometown, right?
So when I ask people, international friends, what they think of Seattle, right off the top of their head, they're like, "Oh man, rain."
It's a really cool city. It's got a lot of really cool atmosphere. It's got a lot of low cloud decks, a lot of fog, a lot of rain.
The cool part about working on this new system is that we can throw the type of detail that we just couldn't before.
And say, hey, look, we want a bank of puddles here. We're just going to paint some blue verts in here.
We can come in here and we can lower the puddle values. We come in here with the tools, and I can start painting in these patches where I want, destruction, fall off, and then kind of for the final awesome bits here, a lot of wetness and puddles just to kind of give it a rained-on feel, like we've kind of been here a while.
If it's super wet time of day, you'll see streaks of wet coming down the sides of the building, and we can control that too. You see the sun hitting a wet street, and it kind of flares out for a second, just like if you're walking down the street and it had just rained, and the sun is coming down the center of a street, right? And it flares out in your eyes. You want that. So I can make it feel like there's really heavy fog sitting on the bay and the water down here. Which for me it's great because maybe I want really low hanging fog and to be more clear as it goes up. It allows me to create some really super interesting times of day.
One of the features I'm most excited about is actually that share button, because we're of course going to use it for cool replays of all the fun physics stuff that happens.
You know, you throw a smoke grenade at a tower, it collapses, it squishes like 4 guys. Then they get mad, send out a helicopter, the helicopter's shooting at you, it's exploding all these cars. But for me, I'm gonna be that boring guy who just has a bunch of gorgeous beauty shots because the city looks so sharp that I could just see people stopping on top of a building and just kind of doing a little 10-second pan, just looking around and taking it all in.
Being able to actually light an entire game for PS4 and make it, you know, look like the city that I live in, that's awesome.
We're sitting right now in one of 2 state-of-the-art recording rooms. This is a control room. We primarily use it for mixing. We have 2 live rooms over in here that are fully tied into this room, and then we have another control room, which we can also mix in, but we really built that to track. And that's got an analog API console.
Right now, the studio's set up in a pretty traditional sort of rock band format. We sort of run the gamut from traditional orchestral setups that we've had in this room. The way our group is supported by Sony and the development teams here is that nothing's ever really off limits, so creativity is kind of placed above all else.
We work with an extremely wide spectrum of talent. We pull the talent from the film industry, from the record industry, from the TV industry, and of course from the video game industry. Having in-house facilities like this and of this caliber allows us to bring artists and composers and players here to collaborate, to innovate, and really to create music that they couldn't have created on their own.
Our team's been working hand in hand with Sucker Punch as their music service group since the first inFamous. One of the greatest things about that relationship is that it's extremely collaborative. Having the music have a personality, I think, has been really important to Sucker Punch, and our team has really tried to hold on to that.
inFamous Second Son was a bit of a departure compared to past inFamous games where the locale was really what determined kind of the direction of the musical score. And this time we let Delson's personality and his character really define the musical score.
The actual music production itself was an iterative process. So even though we went into it with a style in mind, it was a style that we didn't feel like really existed. We knew that Delson, the main character, was going to be the focus of our musical style. And you can really hear like a totally destroyed guitar and a beautiful cello in the same piece of music. And getting those things to work together was really a challenge and a lot of fun. Creating this kind of industrial, edgy music with nothing but live, organic sounds created by humans was a real challenge and a real fun aspect of the project.
inFamous Second Son is a great example of how we really utilize these facilities to do something that we couldn't have done without them. And that score promises to be one of the most dynamic and exciting scores we've ever produced.